Okay, so when we think about the USSF, the Space Force, I think a lot of us, maybe we picture, all that super cool technology, the satellites, the rockets, maybe even some cyber warfare, really high-tech stuff.
Right, cutting edge.
But what we might not immediately think about, and this is what I found so fascinating about this document you sent over, the Relationship Literacy Program Social Operating System Manual, is how much emphasis it puts on the human element, the people.
Right.
It's a really dense manual.
It is.
But I think the best way to think about it is like, how your phone needs an operating system to run all the apps and make sure everything works right?
Absolutely.
Well, this is like the Space Force's operating system for their most important asset, their people.
I think that's a great analogy. And, what's so interesting about this manual is that it argues that the pressures and the conditions of Space Force operations, things like extended deployments, being far away from support, the fact that you need so much specialized technical knowledge, the mental intensity of the missions, all of this means that having strong interpersonal skills is absolutely crucial, not just, a nice to have.
Right, it's essential.
Yeah, it's essential for mission success. And, the manual really argues that without this, what they call relationship literacy, teams are going to struggle. They're going to struggle with resolving conflicts, with building that kind of deep trust that you need to really collaborate effectively and ultimately, achieving their objectives.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to dive into today, right? You're someone who likes to get a handle on things quickly but thoroughly, and that's what we aim for in these deep dives.
Absolutely.
Our mission today is to unpack this RLP SOS manual, figure out what are the core challenges it's trying to address, and what kind of framework does it propose for a better, more robust Space Force culture. So let's jump into those challenges. Like, what are some of the key things this manual is pinpointing?
Well, one of the big things they focus on is the psychological impact of operating in space. Imagine you're one of these personnel engaged in space-based missions. Potentially, you're isolated for long periods of time.
Detached,
not just physically, but maybe even emotionally. And the RLP SOS, it tries to equip them with coping mechanisms, communication strategies that are adapted to this very remote, kind of unusual environment, and also conflict resolution techniques, understanding that the pressures they face are quite unique.
Yeah, it's very different from, maybe being on a ship or at a base.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Very different environment.
And I can imagine that being so far removed, not just physically, but even in terms of the work they're doing, it could really put a strain on those normal support networks that people might have.
Right.
And then on top of that, you're talking about incredibly intense responsibilities.
Right.
These are people safeguarding national security assets. That's a huge weight on their shoulders.
It is, and the level of technical and operational stress is really high.
I bet.
Whether they're, maintaining satellites, defending against cyber threats from space, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
The expectation is absolute precision.
Yeah.
And the manual points out that this pressure can lead to friction within teams, which could, potentially affect mission readiness.
Yeah.
So a core aim of the RLP SOS is to figure out how to manage this kind of workplace tension before it becomes a big problem.
Yeah, being proactive about it.
Yeah, being proactive. And it's not just, generic stress management. They really try and tailor the approach to the specific stressors that are unique to the Space Force environment.
Yeah, because those are probably very unique stressors, like we can't even really imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this is what really jumped out at me, and this is about, the Space Force's reliance on all this advanced technology. Right. They're dealing not only with interpersonal dynamics, but also with the ethical dilemmas that come with AI and these autonomous systems. Like, that's a whole other level of stuff to grapple with.
And the manual is very interesting. It's really quite thought-provoking in how it directly addresses those ethical dilemmas, which, these are new dilemmas as we get more into AI, as we get into, autonomous weaponry in certain situations, advanced cyber capabilities. This brings up questions we haven't had to deal with before. Like, how do you build trust in an AI system that's making, important recommendations during a mission?
Yeah, how do you even begin to do that?
Exactly. And then there's the question of, what happens when AI logic, which is, based on data, seems to conflict with basic human ethics.
Right.
In a high-stakes scenario.
Yeah.
The RLP SOS actually provides a framework for having these kinds of ethical discussions. It pushes for leadership training, focused on how do we collaborate effectively and ethically between humans and AI.
Yeah.
And then there's, how do we define accountability? When you have these technologically advanced operations, it's all about making sure our ethics keep pace with our technology. That's really a key point.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to bake ethics into these rapidly evolving technologies.
Exactly.
And then there's something that, I think is a factor in any big organization, but maybe even more so in the military, which is maintaining respect across different ranks.
Yeah, and the manual, it really underscores how important respect is within that military hierarchy. They recognize that problems like ineffective leadership, breakdowns in communication, whether it's going up or down the chain of command, and not having enough training in interpersonal skills, this can all lead to conflict.
Right, it erodes that unit cohesion.
Exactly, it erodes that unit cohesion, and that's bad news. So what the RLP SOS tries to do is cultivate a culture of respect by really weaving those relationship literacy principles into every level of the Space Force structure. It's not about, getting rid of the hierarchy,
No.
which is necessary.
Yeah.
It's about making sure the hierarchy works in a way that promotes dignity and respect and teamwork, regardless of your rank.
So it's kind of like setting the ground rules.
Setting the ground rules, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so those are some of the challenges, the big challenges that the manual is identifying. Let's get into their solutions. What's the overall framework that this RLP SOS puts forward?
Well, it's a very comprehensive framework, but at its heart, it's all about building a culture of respect and honor. And they really emphasize instilling those core military values, honor, respect, integrity, as the foundation. That's what everything else is built on.
Yeah, so it's not just about being good at the technical aspects of the job,
No.
but also having that strong moral compass,
Exactly. And they talk about how honor is, the guiding principle for making ethical decisions.
Yeah.
Especially those really high pressure situations that they often face. And then respect, that's what allows you to build the team cohesion that we've been talking about. In integrity, well, that ensures transparency, honesty, accountability at all levels.
Okay, so you have this foundation of values.
Right.
And then how do they kind of practically put that into play?
Well, they talk a lot about, respecting the chain of command, while at the same time fostering accountability and making sure morale is high. It's a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, but the goal is to empower individuals while still maintaining the necessary structure of a military organization.
And a big part of building a positive culture, unfortunately, is also preventing the negative stuff, right?
Right.
And I saw a whole section in here on harassment and discrimination.
Yeah, and what's really important here is that they take a very proactive approach to creating a safe environment. They emphasize that preventing harassment, preventing discrimination, it takes leadership at all levels, setting a zero tolerance tone from the very top.
Right.
Making sure policies are enforced consistently and having clear reporting mechanisms so people feel safe to come forward. It's about making it very clear that these behaviors are not okay and that people can speak up without fear of, what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, so it's about catching those things early.
Right, exactly.
Before they become really serious problems.
Exactly.
And that kind of naturally leads into another big area, which is preventing abuse, violence, and sexual misconduct.
Yeah, and that's a major focus of the RLP SOS. They very clearly define what they mean by abuse. It's not just physical.
Right. Yeah.
It's psychological, it's sexual misconduct. And they stress that all forms need to be addressed.
Yeah.
One key thing is teaching people how to recognize early warning signs. Like, are there intimidation tactics being used?
Yeah.
Is someone trying to exert excessive control?
Yeah.
Are you noticing a decline in a colleague's well-being? Or maybe just seemingly small, inappropriate comments that could be a sign of a bigger problem.
Right.
The idea is to catch these things early before they escalate.
Yeah, and I remember reading something in here about empowering bystanders, too.
Yes, absolutely. They put a lot of emphasis on giving people practical strategies for intervening. That see something, say something, do something kind of idea.
Right.
It's about giving people the tools and the confidence to step in if they see something that's not okay.
Yeah.
And also emphasizing that if misconduct does occur, those zero tolerance policies need to be applied consistently.
To hold people accountable.
Exactly, to hold people accountable.
That's not just about punishment, is it?
No, it's not. The RLP SOS also talks a lot about support systems. They want confidential reporting channels.
Yeah.
They want robust support systems for victims. The idea is to create safe ways for people to come forward and get the help they need.
Yeah, feeling safe to come forward.
Exactly.
Now, all of this is happening within the context of military life, which, it's demanding not just on the service member, but also on their families.
Right.
And I saw that the manual spends a lot of time on strengthening families and trying to reduce domestic violence.
Yeah, they talk about the impact of military service on families, especially the stress of deployments. You're separated for a long time. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's an emotional toll.
Yeah.
And they emphasize how important it is to have good conflict resolution skills and relationships, to communicate well.
Right.
These are essential for keeping families strong under these really difficult circumstances.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And the RLP SOS, it outlines some early intervention strategies for reducing domestic violence in military families. It talks about building support networks, strengthening community resources, and practical things like how to stay connected during deployments.
Yeah.
They also highlight the need for mental health resources, to help people deal with things like PTSD, stress, those things that can really impact a family.
Yeah.
And importantly, they call for policies that promote a better work-life balance for service members.
That makes a lot of sense, because if you have a strong family, a supported family, that must make the service member stronger.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
And then another really important area that they focus on, and we can't shy away from this, is suicide prevention.
Absolutely. And the manual, it gives this issue the attention it deserves.
Yeah.
They talk about recognizing risk factors, things like stress, trauma, depression, isolation, those challenges that come with transitioning out of the military.
Yeah.
And one of the key things they emphasize is creating an environment where people feel comfortable talking about mental health.
Right.
And where seeking help isn't stigmatized, because that stigma can be a huge barrier.
Yeah, for sure.
They also talk about training peer counselors, so people have someone they can turn to within their unit. They talk about having crisis intervention strategies in place and really expanding access to mental health resources like maybe telehealth or support specifically for veterans. But what's really crucial is that leadership needs to buy into this.
Yeah, it can't just be words on a page.
Right. They need to actively reduce any fear or negative consequences associated with seeking help. The manual also highlights resilience training, teaching people skills for managing their emotions and dealing with stress. And they talk about the importance of having support networks in place even after people retire.
Yeah, that continued support is important.
It is. It's about prevention. It's about intervention. It's about long-term support. It's the whole picture.
And we've talked a lot about the technology that's so important to the Space Force, but how does this relationship literacy concept play into, something like artificial intelligence?
That's where it gets really interesting. And the manual is quite forward-thinking in this area. They talk about the increasing importance of human AI teaming, of making sure that collaboration is ethical. They also recognize that as we rely more and more on AI to make decisions, we have to think about the ethical implications.
Yeah.
Like, who's accountable when an AI makes a mistake?
Right.
What about bias in algorithms?
Yeah, that's a huge concern.
It is. And then there's the whole issue of trusting autonomous systems with critical tasks.
So it's almost like we need relationship literacy, not just between people, but between humans and machines.
Exactly. And the manual actually suggests that maybe we should build these principles right into the design of AI systems.
That's interesting.
Yeah, almost like giving AI a kind of relational intelligence.
Yeah.
They also talk about the challenge of building trust in these AI systems and the potential psychological effects that all this interaction with AI might have on people.
Yeah, that's something we don't really know yet.
We don't, and they emphasize the importance of transparency, oversight, and they even suggest using AI as a tool in relationship literacy training.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So AI could actually help us improve our relationships with each other.
Potentially, yeah, through things like simulations or giving personalized feedback.
That's really cool.
It's definitely an area to watch.
Now, this all sounds like a big undertaking. Like, how does the manual actually think this RLP SOS can be implemented across all the different parts of the Space Force?
Well, they're very clear that training on these principles needs to be standardized, and it needs to be included at all levels, from basic training all the way up to leadership development.
Right, so it has to be baked into everything.
Exactly. But they also recognize that you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right, every unit's different.
Every unit's different, and they have different needs, so they emphasize tailoring the RLP SOS to the specific context of the different divisions. You know, space operations will have different challenges, from cyber warfare, from ground support, from air reconnaissance.
So the principles are the same, but how you apply them might be different.
Exactly. And they also stress that for this to work, you need buy-in from leadership at every level.
Yeah, it can't just be a grassroots thing.
No, it has to come from the top. And they talk about measuring success, you know, using KPIs, things like how much trust is there within teams.
Yeah.
Has conflict gone down? Are missions more successful?
Right.
Are people staying in the Space Force longer?
Those are all good metrics.
They are. And the manual also says, look, we need to evaluate this constantly.
Yeah.
We need to be willing to adapt as new challenges arise.
Right, because it's a constantly evolving landscape.
Exactly. And they also talk about the importance of collaborating with other branches of the military.
Oh, yeah, sharing best practices.
Sharing best practices, learning from each other, because ultimately the goal is to make this a core part of Space Force culture.
Right. It's not just a program, it's a way of life.
It's a way of being.
Yeah, and of course, with a program this big, you have to think about the practicalities. You know, the money, the technology, and I did see a section in there about licensing and those sorts of things.
Yeah, they do touch on those program management elements. You know, licensing agreements, subscriptions, maybe using government contracts. And they also talk about the financial sustainability of the program.
Right, you gotta keep the lights on.
Exactly. And they acknowledge that implementing this, especially with all the technology involved, there are going to be challenges.
Yeah, I bet.
Especially in remote locations, integrating with existing AI systems, keeping data secure, all of that.
Yeah. So it's not just a theory, they're really thinking about how to make this work.
They are. It's very practical.
Okay, so as we wrap up, what would you say is the most important thing we should take away from all of this?
I think the key message is that this RLP SOS, it's a deliberate effort to build a space force that is more resilient, more ethical, and more effective by recognizing that human connection and relationship skills, they're just as important as technological prowess.
And that's something we might not think about when we think about, you know, space exploration and all that stuff.
Right, we tend to focus on the tech.
Yeah.
But they're saying, look, the human element, it's critical, it's essential.
And it sounds like they're really trying to make relationship literacy a strategic asset, almost like a force multiplier, as they call it.
Exactly. It's a way to enhance communication, teamwork, ethical decision-making, and psychological resilience.
Yeah.
You know, make people stronger in the face of all these challenges.
And they're acknowledging that implementing this won't be easy, but they're committed to it, and they're emphasizing leadership, participation, and constant evaluation.
The long-term commitment.
It is.
And they're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, well, this has been really insightful. I think we often focus on the technology when we think about space, but this is really about the people.
Right.
And I think that's something we should all keep in mind.
Absolutely.
So as we finish up here, a final thought for you all to consider. You know, in a future where technology is only going to become more important, more present in our lives,
right?
How might these principles of relationship literacy extend beyond our interactions with each other? Like, what about our relationships with AI?
Interesting question.
Yeah, will we need to develop a whole new type of relationship literacy to navigate this increasingly technological world?
Something to think about.
Yeah, food for thought.
It is.
All right, well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
Great talking to you.
Yeah, you too.